I just want to get rid of forms. Like I never want to fill out a form again. I just booked a bunch of flights for vacation over the summer and I now have my 15-year-old's passport number memorized, but I don't want that to be memorized, like
I don't have my own passport.
yeah, well, I entered it so many times, it's like, God, I'm losing my mind here. So Superfill is, obviously we all become accustomed to autofill working on your name, your address, maybe your credit card information. Superfill is that, but extended to many other fields.
That's awesome. Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to Release Notes. My name is Logan Kilpatrick on the Google DeepMind team. Today I'm joined by Samir, who leads the Android team. We're talking about all of the new stuff coming to the Android ecosystem from the Android show, from I/O, and now with Android 17. So Samir, thanks for being here and sitting down.
Thanks for having me.
We were just chatting off camera and the spark hit me, which was sort of this really difficult job that you and the Android team have of like bringing all of this technology to literally like billions and billions of different people. And you mentioned to me that as part of the Android show, you didn't say the word AI once, which I think is awesome. As an ecosystem, it feels we're like so focused on the technology right now and not enough on like actually what it does for real people who are using the devices. And I feel like you probably have like a really great perspective on this. So I'd love to sort of start there and then we can talk about all the stuff that y'all launched.
Yeah. Well, so for the Android show, it's all know your audience, right? And our audience is a lot of people who are using devices and they're excited about technology. They're excited about the product that they're using. They want it to get better, but they're not necessarily the folks who are super, super deep on AI. Some are, but some are not, because it's a much wider audience. And I think that there's just something going on with the word AI, like I think there's a reaction to it. It's scary for some people. It means different things to different people. I think it's kind of become a little overloaded. Obviously inside Google and as technologists, like we all know that this is a huge moment and it's a platform shift and it's totally changing everything and we're all embracing it. But then when you talk about it from a consumer standpoint, I think it's really important, we've learned, to not talk about the tech as the lead-in, but rather to talk about the benefit, And so I'll just give you one example, the way we learned this. We launched a feature a couple years ago on Android called Circle to Search. And it's a really simple concept, right? You hold down the home button on your Android phone, screen lights up. You can then circle any object on the screen. It could be, like the tie that someone's wearing that you're really interested in, or it could be like the beautiful lake that's in this photo that you've got on some social media post. And then you can ask a question about it, like, where do I buy that? Or how do I get there? Or what is that thing, And this was cool because like it was really hard to describe these things to Google before. Like, how do I describe that tie? What would I even say? And same with the lake. It's like, if I could describe it, I'd probably know already what it was. You know what I mean? So this is like a really simple capability, but that feature just took off. Like it took off. And there's so much AI behind that. There's so much like machine vision behind it. There's so many things that make it go. But we actually didn't mention any of those things. We just talked about showing what you could do with it and people loved it. And then we've done other features where we've led with the AI and people are kind of like, oh, I don't know about your AI. I'm not feeling that as much. So we didn't say the word AI once in the show. A lot of the features are definitely AI powered. And I think the reception was better that way because people are like, okay, well, you're actually telling me why this is good and helpful in my life.
Yeah. One of the biggest points of tension, it feels like, for this balance of how much AI to lead with versus not is actually to the point that you made, which is like, we're in this platform shift. And I feel like people are like, who should I be betting on in this? My perspective is it's very clear that Android is like at the absolute frontier of trying to push this rock up the hill from like a new being at the forefront of that platform shift. But I'm actually curious, how is that manifested for Android? And maybe we can use sort of like all the announcements that just landed as a version of the story.
I mean, we think it's really important technology to help build better experiences for the user, and I think that's like fundamentally what drives us. And I mean, it's just wild what these models can do. It's like really incredible. And there are things that we've wanted to do for a long time. A lot of times I would see mock-ups of some new feature or concept from a product manager who hadn't really maybe been around a long time and be like, okay, that's not going to work, but now I'm like, bring all those back, because like, I actually think the tech is ready for that. I mean, one example that was pretty straightforward, Android is really very popular in a number of countries where the rate of scam and spam is really high, so like you get a lot of phone calls, you get a lot of text messages that are trying to get you to part with information that you really shouldn't be. We built this model working with GDM on-device model that actually, with your permission, can listen to a call from an unknown number. And we worked with a bunch of banks, for example, to make sure the model understood what like a bank would never ask you for. A bank will never ask you for certain things. And they actually have like consortiums and associations where they work together to like have these rules, like
Yeah.
we won't do this. And so it's like if the model hears that like someone's like, well, give me this, on the phone, it pops up and vibrates the phone. It's like, this is a scam,
Wow.
and you should hang up right now. Right. And that's like pretty useful, and
Yeah.
so that's something that we think impacts so many people in a positive way. And we feel that that's like the promise of this technology is like you can do so much more with it. So it's a really big part of our strategy. But I think the way we need to describe it to people is like, here's what it does for you.
Yeah, I love that. Demis, every time we're in one of these meetings talking about these big moments, he wants to land this point of technology that works for you.
Yeah.
That's true at the same time that we also, as Google, want to tell this like we're at the lead and at the frontier. And I feel like there's a lot of tension in those things. But something interesting about what you just described is the models actually running on device. We were chatting really quick before we were on camera, and the thread of it was like, the OpenClaw moment happened, Gemma 4 happened, and actually the AI Edge gallery app, people were downloading this and playing around with that. So many people all of a sudden started to grok that on-device models are really going to be powerful and capable and like enable new experiences. And I'm curious, I feel like Android has this like really interesting tension because you have billions of devices. Obviously you need high-end new devices in order to run the models because it just requires more performant hardware. And then there's like this whole group of people who don't have the new high-end devices who would really benefit from AI. And sort of from a platform perspective, I'm curious like how you're balancing and like what the open model or on-device model sort of like strategy looks like from that
Yeah, I think
perspective.
the on-device model strategy it's evolving right now, because I do agree with you that the on-device models are getting to a point now where they're seriously impressive,
Yeah.
and I think we are on the cusp of something pretty amazing there. From an Android perspective, our mission is to bring computing, the best of computing, to everyone in the world. That's high-end devices. That's the most basic device that you can buy. It's really important to us to bring the best of computing to everybody. That's like really what gets us up in the morning. Obviously, there's like kind of two forms of innovation motion that we go through. One is at the high end, let's create the future. And you do that at the high end with flagship devices because they have the more system resources. And so before you know how to optimize that, you are just using all the system resources you can and you're trying to push the boundary of what's possible. And so we're definitely doing that. But one of the motions that we've also had over the years is, how do you innovate? It's a different kind of innovation where you take those capabilities and then you flow them down. And that flowing down typically requires like a different approach. You are now looking for, how can we take the kernel of what we've got here, in at the flagship level, and the features that are most profound and most interesting, and then find ways of making those features run on devices which are less capable. Sometimes that involves using the server, obviously, but sometimes that involves creating different specialized on-device models, and also working with silicon providers to make sure that those can actually run efficiently, thermals, battery constraints, et cetera. But we've done that effectively over the years, and I'm excited about that. I think right now it's a little bit sinusoidal. Like right now we're focused on the flagship side of it because there's so much innovation that happens. And as soon as we get the first set of features there on device, we already have a number of them. Like I mentioned, the scam detection one, that we think are really working for people. Now it's about like, how do you flow that down over time?
Yeah. And how much do you think that sort of symbiosis between the new models and sort of the capabilities that are unlocked like means at like a macro perspective for Android? Is it like, the experience we see today, 5 years from now, when, the models are really good and work great on device for like pretty much the hardware that everyone has, it'll be a totally different experience? And like, is that sort of the high-end models sort of like correlating, or the high-end devices sort of correlating to like an even more reimagined experience relative to the later generation devices?
It's a really good question. I mean, if I just take like even a half step back from that question, just to put it in context, like the way I think about what we're doing right now, what we've been doing in computing for like the last 40 plus years, is we have created systems that put the user in the role of the micromanager of the system. The best we can do right now is like, first we have a command line interface. It's like, what would you like to do? And then it's like, now you have a GUI where you have menus and pointing devices and what have you, but it's still you as the user conceptualizing, what is my goal? taking that goal and breaking it down into like all the discrete actions you want to take. And then you literally are clicking on sub actions as you go. So that's like the micromanager model that we have for computing. It is still kind of intimidating to do things, like people take classes still to use all this software and what have you. I think that what we have an opportunity to go from is operating systems to intelligence systems, which is kind of how we talk about the evolution over the next n years of Android, where an intelligence system is one that you articulate your goals. And the system's job is, of course, managing resources, but also managing context and figuring out how to take your goals, the context that's around those, and produce the actions that you want. And of course, we want to do that starting with a number of these flagship devices. We'll get it right there. Over time, I do think the interface is going to change. I do think the interface will be more intent to action oriented as opposed to micromanagement.
Yeah, I have so many questions to follow up on this. Maybe to start, how do you think this changes maybe in the more short term? We've seen like voice take off as like a new interface. How much do you think that manifests itself in some of these new experiences?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people want to go directly to agents when I talk about intent to action. And I think agents is super important and we
Yeah.
should come back and talk about that. But I'm glad you brought up voice because one of the fundamental parts of an operating system is the input method. Like, how does the user communicate with the system what they want to have done? And a big part of that is the keyboard. Either it's on your phone or a physical keyboard. Hasn't changed that much in a long time. The last thing we really added to the keyboard in a big way, I think that made a huge difference. I mean, we keep making it better, right? But the last big thing was like autocomplete.
Yeah. And I'm fighting autocomplete on a daily basis still.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
I'll tell you
autocomplete
that
could be a
much.
lot better, honestly, but autocomplete is like 2012, if I'm memory serves, 2013, 2014, we added some. Swipe is another thing too, but fundamentally the keyboard hasn't changed a ton. Now, the keyboard for me is the perfect example of a micromanagement input system. You literally think about what you want to say. Like, what's the goal of what you're trying to say? You break it down into, okay, here are the words I want to use. And then you literally peck those letters of those words onto, I mean, it's what we're just used to, right? We don't even think about it. We just do it. But so one of the things we announced recently was this feature that we're going to roll out this summer called Rambler. And Rambler is fundamentally it's different in that the microphone, when you tap the microphone, you just ramble like I've been doing, I guess, here. And instead of just faithfully transcribing exactly in a dictation form what you were verbally saying, it takes everything you've said and then distills it down to like what you really wanted to say, lets you look at that and you're like, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then you go. There's a reason why, like, I think for a long time humans have figured out that like, hey, just give me a brain dump of your ideas is like a productive thing to do, because voice and you're kind of verbalizing it and all that. And it's like another person might be like, oh yeah, that's interesting. This is kind of like the equivalent of that. Can I show it to you?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Here we go. So here I am in Google Messages, and let's say I want to text you here. So I've got the microphone, which is in Google Keyboard, which, by the way, is used like hundreds of millions of times a day to do like voice dictation,
Yeah.
right? So okay, so here's Rambler on the mic. Hey there. If you're going to the store, can you pick up some fruit? Maybe like some bananas, mangoes, strawberries, and oranges? Actually, never mind the bananas. We don't need any more of those. We have plenty of those.
I love that UI too.
Okay, so what you can see there is like none of the ums and ahs are there, right? And then I went through this whole thing about bananas, right? And it's just like, okay, I get it. You don't want the bananas. Can you make it into a list? Add some emoji.
Wow, that's fast. And is that all running on device? I
No,
assume?
so right now this is actually talking to the server.
Really?
Yeah, so we've
It's
made it
fast.
super fast. And what's also nice about it is we didn't want it to make it feel like it was writing in kind of a style that people think is created by a chatbot.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why it didn't make it a list in the beginning.
Yeah.
We've really tuned it for like more conversational tone. So I had to tell it to make it a list. The emoji obviously is like gratuitous, but,
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
was
yeah.
like, let's go for it. So that's Rambler. And you of course can use this just to send text. Here, I'm going to send that to you there. You of course can use this to send simple text and stuff, but you could also use it to like dictate a paper or something that you
Yeah.
want to write, and it works equally well for those kinds of things. So that's a different kind of keyboard. And this will be a mode that you can use the mic in. Of course, you can still type on the keyboard if old school. But we just think like this is a big upgrade for the keyboard, and is a lot of what we mean by an intelligent system. Like now the keyboard is actually really intelligent.
Input is the first step of this story of the sort of transformation that's taking place. The second step is actually like actions being taken on the device. And so I think one of the announcements that also came was Android is actually like going and clicking things in the phone so that I'm articulating in voice, and then Android's actually doing the micromanaging for me, to use your analogy.
Yeah, that's right. So we call this app automation, and it's basically exactly what it sounds like, which is you tell Gemini that you want to get something done.
Actually, really quick, I think this would have been the most like quintessential point to use AI, and to just say app automation and not say AI is like actually like it hits on the point, the commitment to like not sort of like sell the AI bit of it, but like sell the outcome, which is like automating apps on your phone.
That's exactly the idea. A computing system going through and tapping on things and completing actions. When we show it to people, they're both wowed and also a little bit nervous at the same
Yeah.
time. And so, we wanted to make it as approachable as possible. So a few things that we did. One is we built a virtual window system in Android. So what happens is that when you ask Gemini to do something like this, let me start by grounding it in an example. The example I love because it has some complexity to it is I have a list of people who are coming to my barbecue up on the screen. And each person next to it in this list has how many people are in their party and whether they're a vegetarian or not.
Hmm.
And then if I long press on the power button, screen context comes up for Gemini, and so it can see the doc with me now. And I say, hey, can you go to Instacart and put what I'll need for the barbecue for all these people in my cart in Safeway, right? What it then does is we have a virtual window system in Android. So once Gemini starts automation, it will say, okay, I'm going to start this in a virtual window, which means it's a containerized environment where the app that you've designated and Gemini can now exist in a window, which you can minimize into your status bar.
Ah,
And so
interesting.
you can go back to that window anytime. The AI agent can't go outside of that container, meaning it can't use other apps. You can watch it. Sometimes it's fun to watch.
Yeah,
Like it
yeah.
just like takes the screen. Like when I was watching it with this example, one of the things is it was navigating through Safeway and it figured out the thing that all of us already know, which is like for whatever reason, the hot dog buns package and the hot dogs are never the same number, right?
This
So
is a
it's like
big hot dog conspiracy.
it's a
That's
big
what
hot
it
dog
is.
conspiracy, right? And so it's like, well, wait a minute. Like, its thinking is at the bottom as it's doing this. It's like, wait a minute, the hot dog buns don't match with the. It's like, I think I'm gonna need more buns than I need hot dogs. Well, how should I resolve this? And it's like kind of fascinating to watch it do
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But it added all the stuff. It figured out it needed veggie burgers. It did the thing, added the cart, and then it comes and gives you a notification and pings you. It says, hey, your cart's ready, take a look at it. We've made it stop before it completes transactions, because right now we feel like it's really important to build trust with the consumer and to have that safety around it. So it brings you back, you look at the cart, you're the one who pushes the commit button, but it saves you some time. And I think that's like what the proposition's all about.
Yeah, that's so cool. Did this concept of like putting apps in a container and like actually like running them on your phone, did that exist before this video? Because it's such an interesting like concept of like Android having that as like a feature available to it.
Yeah, I mean, Android has definitely like an app container and an isolation layer per app, but this notion of something else driving the screen also being limited to that container
Yeah.
and that virtual window that you can minimize. This is different. We haven't really had the need for it yet, because these are single user systems, and you're kind of like, okay, I'm on this device and I'm doing my thing. Why would I need a headless thing going on in the background, which is actually generating UI? Like I wouldn't necessarily need that, but the model does need that because it needs to look and see what's going on your screen. The way I see this evolving over the long term is, there's MCP integrations, there's Chrome, which can also do some form of auto browse and manage things and get things done that way. And then there's also this approach. I see all of those kind of coming together under the agent. You sort of tell Gemini, "Hey, I want to get this done," and it figures out the best. These are all become tools for that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way it'll evolve.
in this example, is it vision based? Is it like actually, so it's like using Gemini and then like choosing the like
That's
pixel coordinates, if you will, to
that's
like
right. It
click?
like looks at the screen and it's like using the app just like you. It's like, I think I should open up that menu. And
Yeah.
it opens up that menu. You see it like tap on the search bar and like start searching for the hot dog buns. And we wanted that to be like handing your phone to a trusted assistant and saying like, "Hey, I gotta get this other thing done. Can you get this done for me?" That's kind of the way I think about the user model around it.
No, I love that. Well, and part of that story actually to make this possible, as you were describing that use case, is Gemini Intelligence at the beginning as sort of like the way to I think like kick off actually this workflow. For folks who missed the Gemini Intelligence headline, do you want to sort of
Yeah,
talk through
yeah.
that as
You know,
well?
we wanted a way to describe the best Gemini experience on the most premium Android devices, and we call that Gemini Intelligence. We just announced that at the Android show a couple weeks ago, and it's a set of capabilities that are really at the bleeding edge that help people with all these kinds of things. You know, and we talked about Rambler, we talked about automation. Another one that I'm really excited about is something we're calling Superfill. I just want to get rid of forms. Like, I never want to fill out a form again. I just booked a bunch of flights for vacation over the summer, and I now have my 15-year-old's passport number memorized, but I don't want that to be memorized, like,
I don't have my own password
yeah,
number
well, I
memorized.
entered it so many times, it's like, God, I'm losing my mind here. So Superfill is obviously we all become accustomed to autofill working on your name, your address, maybe your credit card information. Superfill is that, but extended to many other fields.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and the idea is that if you've given Gemini your permission, and that's an important step, then if you've uploaded your passport to Google Photos, if
Mm,
you, for example, have an email with your confirmation code in it, if you have, these are all things that exist in your Google account, if you
yeah,
will, it can pull those pieces of information and suggest them to you in real time when you're filling out that form.
that's great.
So that's like another example of one of the capabilities that we've got here. And the final one that I think is really, really cool and kind of speaks to how UI may evolve in the future is generative widgets. And so the idea behind a generative widget is, widgets are this like ultimate form of customization. A lot of people have them all over their home screen, and Android, it's been a long loved way to customize. It's like, but someone has to build that widget for you.
Yeah.
Our concept here is, what if you could just say to Gemini, like, I want to see what the latest lap times are for the F1 race that was yesterday, and I want you to keep that updated, build me that widget, right? And no one's maybe built that one. And it'll go off and crank for a while and then basically give you a widget that's exactly that, pulling from publicly available sources of information. And I think it's the beginning of generative UI for your operating system. I think that evolves over time where more of the UI is built for you on the fly.
Love that. I feel like we have this. I don't I don't even know who has this saying anymore. But Android is the platform for builders. All the things you've mentioned so far feel like they're delivering on this. That superfill example. What's actually happening is the model sort of saying, "Hey, there's a open form field. What might go here?" And then it tries to like retrieve a bunch of stuff, or is it like there's a specific set of categories like passport or travel
Yeah.
information is one of those, and it just pulls that into your personal context or something like that?
Initially, for the sake of making sure that we get the precision and recall trade-off right, and that we also make sure that users become comfortable with this and
Yeah.
feel like it's something they can rely on, is we've limited it to a set of different types of entities,
Got it.
passport information, driver's licenses. One of the ones I love is your car's license plate.
Mm.
Like, if you have that DMV registration in your email where it
I
gives you,
search my pictures every time to
right,
try to find it.
and so like, a good example of this is like, let's say you're parking somewhere, and the parking app that, the QR code that you scan in that parking lot is like, enter your car's license plate, and you're already walking out the parking lot. You're like, oh man, and so you're either opening up Photos or Gmail or whatever you're searching for it. Now it just like detects that, like, it will tell you to fill it. So all that's coming this summer. We have a system which has gone and retrieved those entities. It has them pre-ready, if you will, in a centralized repository. When the system on the device detects that you're looking at a form which has the need for one of those entities, it will make a secure request to pull that information and then present it to you in the keyboard and say, "Hey, do you want to autofill this in?" And if you do, then it goes and grabs it and puts it in the field for you.
Yeah, I love that. I have a request, which is Not that I don't like the Rambler name, but I feel like something with Yap mode. I feel like you gotta sort of hit people with Yap. People love to yap all the
I
time.
see. I think it's a good point. I'll have to check to make sure it's trademarkable. But
I
yeah, but yes,
I
we'll
feel
do
like
it.
Yap mode would be cool.
Yeah, we'll do it.
The other thing, actually, back to this this sort of like Android being the platform for builders. We launched at I/O actually in collaboration with your team, the ability to build Android apps natively in AI Studio. I think it's like 500,000 now
So
plus
crazy.
Android
It's so
apps. It's
awesome.
crazy. It's so great. I mean, it's like so cool to see a bunch of people who had like never built an app before go and build an app, build their first app in the Android
Yeah.
ecosystem. It's awesome. I preceded this prompt for you ahead of time so that we could talk about this. My new favorite question inside of Google to ask people is like, will Google in 5 years have 10,000 products or three products, three apps, 10,000 apps? You don't even need to answer the question, but I think like Android as sort of an operating system where like the predominant interface in a lot of ways is I show up and I go through apps. I think it has like a bunch of interesting implications, not only for Google, but also the ecosystem writ large of like
Yeah.
people are building more apps than they've ever built today at the same time that it feels like everybody's trying to build super apps or whatever that means. So I'm curious sort of how you're thinking about it from an Android
Yeah,
perspective.
it's a really interesting moment, right? Because to your point, there's all this talk of like, will there be no reason for apps? And at the same time, we have all these people who are becoming developers,
Yeah.
who are creating for the first time, and so it's a pretty interesting time. I don't think apps go away. I think that if I can relate it a little bit to there's this SaaS apocalypse thing that everyone kind of is talking about. And that's where, uh, all the SaaS companies in the world got hit pretty hard. This notion that with agentic AI, there won't be as much need for these applications anymore. And people will either make their own or their UIs will go away and they'll just become backends that are commoditized or what have you. And I think that's a very surface deep way of looking at what's
Yeah.
really going to happen. I don't think all SaaS is the same. And if I apply that same kind of like, wait, this pretty surface level thing to, let's call it the app apocalypse, okay? Like, I think we need to get a little bit deeper to really get an answer to that. I think part of it is understanding the consumer behavior. So if we look at what consumers are really doing on their phone, right? They're spending 70, 80+% of their time in apps, which I would call like experiential, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. They're chatting with friends, they're playing games. That's the bulk of the time spent. If you think about apps that are transactional in nature, more transactional in nature, booking a ride, getting a meal, these kinds of things, um, that's certainly some of the time, but it's less of the time than you think. Not
Oh,
not not less important, but less of the time. And then if you think that apps can exist kind of on the spectrum, if you have a two by two, and one is like how experiential is it, and the other is how transactional is it? Because apps can have points that are in the middle. I think what you see is the time is kind of clustered around that the experiential, less transactional
mm,
side of that. And so I think the grid of apps will evolve. I do think that's and I'll talk about Android's view on that in just a second, but I don't think that we want our agents to like be watching the TikTok or the YouTube for us. I think like users still want to kick back and do some of that,
yeah.
and they want to engage with their friends on messaging and they want to play their games. And so I do think the transactional apps are the ones that'll probably change the most. And I think those will probably have two modes. I think there's an experiential version of those apps where they're offering like a much richer, engaging experience. And then there's a mode where they're almost agentic themselves and probably responding to agentic queries from others. One example of this is like Maps. I don't run the Maps team, so sorry, Maps team, if this isn't what you had in mind. But like Maps has like an Ask Maps feature inside it now, which is I kind of feel like is their agentic mode of being. And like if you were planning an event, you might ask your agent, it's the summertime, like what are great venues like around here where, around Tahoe where I could have this event or whatever. And it might tell you or whatever. But then you might be like, oh, well, I want to know like what the outdoor indoor flow of this venue is really going to be like, and then you might open maps, go to satellite view and like zoom in and look around. And, that's an experiential view of
Yeah.
like that. So I don't think it's going to be like apps go away. I think it's going to be much more nuanced on the transactional side. And then the experiential ones, frankly, I think we might all have more time for those,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
more of those. The way Android's handling this is we've announced this new concept called Android Halo. And what Android Halo is, it's a place, a dedicated location in the status bar where your agent of choice, Gemini or another agent, can actually update you and get input from you on the task or tasks that you're having it do. So these agents doing stuff in the background for you are going to want to like ask you a question or give you an update or show you the result or what have you. And so you can follow along there. And so we think that's like an interesting new spot for how computing may evolve, and the operating system makes it more seamless for you to engage with these things that are running long running tasks for you.
Yeah, there's so many interesting threads of this. I hadn't heard this representation of like experiential versus what was the other
Transactional.
transactional. I actually really like that. The sort of parallel to this is like commerce and what's happened for retail malls. Like you actually have both ends of the spectrum. I bought my mom something at Williams Sonoma, and you go to Williams Sonoma, they're like super kind and they greet you and they're like, you want a coffee? And sort of come on, I'm like, I'm here to buy like a spatula or something like that. It's like a weird, I'm like, oh sure, I guess I'll take a coffee while I go grab my spatula. It feels like they're there to make the experience. I remember that because I'm like, it's so different than like a normal shopping experience. And the other end of the spectrum, you go to the website of any of these companies, you're like, I'm trying to find my thing. I want it to be as fast as possible. I want to click the fewest buttons, and then I want to buy my thing and get out of there because I'm in transaction mode. And so I love that framing of apps building more experiential things. We've seen that happen actually. People have like innovated and they've like changed the way that you go shop now because people are looking for something different because they actually can transact in a different way as well. So I
Yeah.
feel like it'll be a
It will probably expand the use of these services for everyone. If it's that much easier for me to get something done, I'll probably do more of it. And so I think overall retail and commerce has expanded, as you mentioned, right? Between if you take offline and online, you add it all together, it's larger than it was before. And in every platform shift that we have, there's always this notion that the old completely goes away. And maybe that's the case here. I don't know that that's the case. In fact, I think we tend to build on these things. That's the way it tends to go. Like when the web came, it didn't eliminate, like as you said, going to physical locations for things. In fact, those physical experiences in some ways are becoming even more important
yeah.
nowadays. Then when mobile came, it didn't eliminate using the desktop. I think the agentic move is huge and is profound, and I don't want to prognosticate that it won't be that, but these things I think tend to build, and I think that's what we'll see here.
Yeah. Not to overemphasize the sort of platform shift narrative, but we are going to make a platform shift and actually go into a car and start talking about some of the new Android Auto stuff. I have one last question though before we go do that. We were also talking and you were showing in the demo before texting as this interface. And I'm curious sort of your view of from like an Android ecosystem perspective. Obviously voice is one of these native form factors that we're all used to communicating through. I think we already use text to communicate with people. How much you think that's going to be a part of this future interfacing with AI systems and things like that?
Well, I think voice is very natural for a lot of folks, especially in certain form factors. Is in the car, which I'm excited to show you. It is the way you need to interface, right? When you've got a pair of glasses or you're on a run with your watch or what have you. So I think in certain form factors, it is really awesome that the machine can now understand you in natural language, because that was the only way you could really communicate. And before, it was okay, but it was kind of awkward.
Yeah.
We're seeing a shift. Younger consumers in particular, and my kids, they hardly type at all on their phone. They're constantly using the mic to speak. They even send, I mean, it's very common, right? People send voice recordings,
Yeah.
right? Not the actual text, right? And I think speaks to like voice being a very important medium. You can typically speak 3 to 5 times faster than you can type. So it's also efficient. What I think is just really important is that we embrace that. We have ways of doing that that are simple and straightforward. And now, as we mentioned, the machine can understand you so much better. I think it unlocks all kinds of new use cases.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. Well, I'm excited to go jump in the car and places where you actually like couldn't wield intelligence before and like actually do productive work feels like it's now becoming possible. Like you sort of couldn't do anything useful in a car because you had to focus on driving. And I feel like now that's sort of changing and there's a bunch of other parallels like this. So it's an interesting moment, actually multiple platform shifts in the context of cars and transportation. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm excited.
Can't wait to show it to you.
Let's do it.
All right. Okay, so we are in the Volvo
EX60. Talk about unreleased hardware. This car actually hasn't shipped yet. So we both get a treat today. We get to check it out. And this car has Google built in, which means that Google and Gemini are running on the infotainment system powered by Android. So what that means is that the car has given Android and Gemini much deeper access to a lot of its systems. So as an example, I could say, hey, Google, it's kind of stuffy in here. Can you adjust the climate?
Of course, increasing the fan speed and turning off air recirculation.
Great. So you can see, usually I wouldn't have this menu up when I was driving, but you can see that it made those adjustments for us. Yeah, I'll give it a thumbs up. And that's because it's fully connected to the onboard infotainment system and all the controls that are in the car. So climate. And then another one, if I was driving, for example, and I didn't want to touch the controls, I could say, hey, Google, can you turn on lane keeping assist?
Okay, turning on the lane keeping aid.
There you go.
So it's pretty fast.
Yeah, so it makes it really convenient. And I can, of course, just speak in natural language. I don't have to say the exact thing in the exact way anymore. And that's the power of Gemini. One of the other really cool things that we have hooked up to this particular vehicle, which I wanted to show you, is Gemini hooked up to the front-facing cameras on this car. And a couple words about that. First, we wanted to see what would be possible if Gemini, with your permission, could see the world as you were driving through it. Now, from a privacy standpoint, it's really important to note that that Gemini is not watching what you're seeing at all times. It's only when you invoke it and ask a question, then the cameras provide that feed to Gemini for a period of time, and then it answers your question, and then it goes back to not being able to see again. So one thing we could just say is, hey, Google, what do you see around us right now? So right now, the feed of the camera is actually being connected to Gemini, and it's taking a look.
Yeah, I'm looking around too to see. We'll see if it gets it right. What's all around us? A couple of.
We are currently at the Googleplex in Mountain View, surrounded by lush greenery and modern office buildings. To your left, you can see Google Building 1020 Charleston Road, which features a brick-accented exterior and is part of the extensive Landings office complex.
There you go.
I love it.
Not bad.
It's awesome.
And of course, it's more interesting when you're actually driving. So why don't we take it for a spin and we can check that out?
We need to go on a road trip or something.
We're going to go on a road trip. There's this really cool sculpture situation that's up here that I always kind of wondered about, and I don't really know how to describe it.
These are the ones that are at the office up here?
Yeah, there's like there's like one right in front here.
I've never understood these either, so I'm very excited.
Hey Google, what's this white sculpture here that's in front of us to my right, and what's the building behind it?
The sculpture on your right is called the Orb, a 33-foot-tall public art installation made of over 6,400 aluminum panels that create unique light patterns. Behind it is the Gradient Canopy building, which features a signature dragon-scale solar roof that generates a significant portion of its own power.
I had no idea it was a solar roof.
That's cool. Yeah.
Does it, from when you activate, is it like just the moment going forward?
Keeps a local buffer.
Okay.
And so, it keeps it. Hey, Google, what is this white tent set of buildings on my left? What's up with those?
The white tent-like structures to your left are part of the Shoreline Amphitheater, a famous outdoor music venue known for its distinctive peaked roof design. It was built on a former landfill and now hosts major concerts and festivals in a scenic park-like setting.
So what I'm really excited about with this technology that we're still working through and figuring out how best to launch in vehicles is when Gemini can see along with you, how can it really make your life easier?
Yeah, I feel like there's so many interesting things like grounding with like street view and like when you're like trying to find the place to turn and sort of it looks weird or whatever and you don't exactly know. I feel like there's going to be so much.
Or street signs that are in a different language.
Yeah.
Help me understand what that means.
Just confusing.
Just confusing. Exactly. So yeah, more from Gemini to come.
Yeah, this is awesome. Well, Samir, this has been awesome. not only did I get a ride around the neighborhood, but just like getting to see and hear about the progress of everything that's happening in Android has been awesome. So I very much appreciate it. It's incredible to see the progress happening and all the excitement in the ecosystem. And yeah, this was an awesome conversation.
Thanks a lot. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for watching this very special episode of Release Notes. We'll see you in the next one.